Hey everybody, welcome to Pine Island Research. It must be Monday night again if we're here doing this. I'm appreciative of everybody choosing us to spend your Monday night and look forward to tonight's show. Um, I want you guys to know that it's an interactive show. If you've got questions you'd like to ask, feel free to put them in all capital letters and we'll try to get to them. Um, Excited. I've got a friend named Les Odell on tonight. He's a person who does some research, started the West Virginia, um, an organization out in West Virginia that he actually is. The coolest thing about this is that I've talked a couple times about how I have sons who are teenagers that have an interest in the same passions that I do, and it's cool to see them involved in stuff and expressing their perceptions of things that they see it with a young mind, maybe a little more curiosity driven. And uh, Les is very similar to that. He's got four sons, so it's going to be interesting to talk to him a little bit about how his sons get involved in that. So I'm going to bring him in. Hey Les, how are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. I'm going to quick say hi to some folks in chat. We got B here, Sandra's here, uh, C. Blanton, Uncle Bones, Angel Nolan, Finding the Trackway, Joe Dryden, My Eyes is here, Judy Wheeler. I know that I'll miss a couple. Sandra Piper, I apologize for that. Um, let's see here. Scroll down. You guys are chatting away. Brown Dwarfs here. Bigfoot Society says, Les, what's up? He must be somebody from your neck of the woods or knows you.
I'm not sure
Um,
here. I
Sharon's
see.
here.
I see a couple people in there I know. I see Gabe and Wes. I see.
Brian McMahon's here.
Hi, Gabe. Hi, Wes. Hi,
Yeah.
Mariah. I
Hey,
see
hey,
they're in there. I
Mariah.
know all those folks.
All right. Wes Stump's here. Mariah. Yeah. We're getting a lot of them. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe to Untold Radio. Tell you a little bit about the network. I do our show, Pine Island Research, on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. But we're 8 shows over 7 nights on this network, and they cover all different areas of the paranormal. I mean, most of them are Sasquatch related, but some of them talk about ufology and different subject matters. I get that's not for everybody. Um, But we're always here talking about kind of the tech tools and tactics of Bigfoot research. Most of our guests are actively involved in getting out in the woods and sharing what they see and what they've experienced. Um, Leon's here, Bigfoot Okanagan. Thanks for joining us, Leon. So, tell us a little bit about where you're from, down in West Virginia. Describe the area.
The area I'm in is it's not like a lot of the West Virginia. I mean, I'm in pretty much a residential area, but there's still quite a bit of land around me. Um, there's some rivers and some lakes nearby, But the area that I usually hang out in and go do what I do is in Monongahela National Forest, and that's pretty much the eastern third, somewhat the eastern third of the state of West Virginia. But I'm in Marion County, West Virginia, which is
Okay,
up in the kind of east of the northern Panhandle and a little southeast of the northern Panhandle.
sure, sure. And you had started the West Virginia Cryptids and Strange Encounters group.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that. How long you guys been together, and who's all part of it?
It, I all this started for me quite a few years ago. I got into paranormal investigating and done it for several years. My son My oldest son got into that with me, also got into that with me. And then I believe this October, well, it's October now, but yeah, this is the 5th year of West Virginia Cryptids and Strange Encounters. And what happened is um, my son got into listening to podcasts about Bigfoot and things like that. And I've always had the interest in Bigfoot, but I just never thought anything was here in West Virginia. I always, thought, it's out Pacific Northwest and whatnot. So as we started discussing it more, and we listened to more podcasts, and then we learned that there's been sightings in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, all around us. So we said, why not start a Facebook page here in West Virginia that would give folks the avenue or a place to come and share their stories, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's ghost stories or UFO stories or anything like that, anything like that, anything paranormal or strange. But then it seemed like Bigfoot became the focus of the page, and that led into people messaging or calling or emailing me about encounters they've had, and I've taken several reports, and then started going out to these locations where these people were having their where they had their experiences, even if it was in the past, a while back, or if it was more, up to present time, and then it just led into that, and it grew. It went from just a small page to, I think we have close to between, it depends on what you look at, the followers or their likes or whatever you want to say on Facebook. We have between 19 and 18 and 19,000, pushing 20,000 people on there.
Wow. It's interesting how there's been a lot of pages like that on Facebook that have popped up over the last year or two. But, when you started doing it further back than that, like when you started it, it's crazy how many people really started getting involved in that, having that kind of a venue to share their experiences, or even if they're just coming there to learn about the subject from other people's experiences. Does it surprise you now when you look back and think, I'm from West Virginia, there's probably not much Bigfoot stuff going on here. And now you look back at it now and realize, does that kind of surprise you a little bit, or?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the people I've talked to, that surprises me. But to me, the biggest surprise is when I started looking into older accounts, and you'll find them in newspapers and stuff like that in West Virginia. They may not call it a Bigfooter, but it's always a strange creature, a wild man of some sort, or anything like that. And they go back as far as like the late 1800s or the 1900s, as far as like I'd say the oldest ones I've found.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've lost in culture today is the small town newspapers, as a resource for where people used to share that kind of stuff before Facebook came along. I grew up, I see small towns up here in northern Minnesota that will still put out their papers that say, Eunice so-and-so had her grandchildren and extended family over Sunday. Dinner was served with potato salad. I mean, this is in the newspaper, So you can imagine that when people had encounters and stuff, how those things ended up in these small town newspapers. And you can still search and find them, but it's just sad that we're losing that kind of resource today, because back then you could share information like that, it'd go out in the paper and it was searchable and kind of there forever. And now people who maybe were willing to do that really aren't now. We've got so many places to share an experience online, and yet people are so worried about being ridiculed or teased, or just people generally giving them a hard time about what they choose to share, that I think we've got more opportunities to do it and less people wanting to do it now. But
yeah, I think that's why the page kind of took off. Is I made it pretty much, I guess you would call a safe place for anybody that had their experiences. Um, and if you didn't want to share anything on the page, that was fine. But if you did share it on the page and somebody was trolling or being a jerk on it, I didn't even comment it. I'd boot them off the page. For me, it wasn't about how many people liked or followed the page. It was, actually helping people or um, giving those people a place to come and talk to somebody. And I've talked to numerous people, that's been connected to me through the page, on phone with via phone calls, text messages, emails, and it's never made it to the page because they don't, I don't have to share it on there. People was like, yeah, you can
Yeah.
share it on there. And the reason I ask if I can sometimes is because it might be in an area that I want to see if there's been other reports or other
Hmm.
encounters. And if they say no, I'd rather not, or if they say they want to be anonymous, which is very important to me. If the person's privacy is very important, and
Sure.
if they say no, then that's fine. I'm not going to badger them at all. I mean,
No.
that's not what the page was started for.
So, in some of the encounters that you've had sent to you that you've actually had an opportunity to go out and research in your area, are there any that really stand out that you felt were pretty plausible and credible?
Well, let's just say I don't have a general area. I've traveled all over the state of West Virginia.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there's been a few. Um, some of them are older accounts, older stories, and I'll just go to that person and just talk to him, even if it's an older story. Um, but one of the most recent was in 2018, and it was in Nicholas County, West Virginia. It was in a little area called Drennan. Uh, this gentleman called me, and he told me he's like, uh, you know, I don't know. He said I don't know what to. He starts out like I don't know what to say here. He said, but I seen something, and what I believe it is Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It's like okay, and he started out. He wanted to make sure. He said, man, I've lived in this state all my life. I'm in my 60s. I've hunted. I've fished these woods all my life. You couldn't have told me or convinced me that there was anything like that in West Virginia. He said, but after that day, he said, you'll never convince me that there's not.
Yeah.
But he called me and he told me, he said they were traveling on, I believe it's Route 39 and just outside of Summersville. It's in, like I said, a little town called Drennan. They come down around a turn and there's a large gravel spot up in the distance. And he, he thought it was a bear at first because it was coming out on all fours. And as it come out and they onto the road and he got closer, this thing stands up in the middle of the road. And they stop and I asked him, I said, well, can you describe it for me? And he's like, yeah. And he described it as uh, it was like wet, shiny hair, had a bare chest. It had a face like a kind of like a monkey type or more of a gorilla type face than really a person. He said he's absolutely adamant that it was not a bear. And so I was like, okay, do you mind if I interview? Because his wife was with him. I said, do you mind if I interview the both of you separately? And they agreed. So I interviewed her, and she agreed to sketch what she saw. And
Hmm.
I carry these little 4x4. I carry these little 4x4 pictures that are CGI renderings, artist renderings of faces that people are supposedly have seen with these things. And I carry about it's like 20 or 24 of them. Why I have a person pick a picture from those pictures, like almost like a police lineup. If they had seen the face. Well, he picks a picture, and her drawing and that picture was really, to me, are really similar. But the thing that stuck out to me when he talked to me the first time he talked to me, and he stayed with us the entire time that we interviewed, is he kept saying, I don't remember seeing the feet. And his wife would said the same thing. I don't remember seeing the feet. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why would anybody make that up? Why is that a part of this, story that is just there? And so I had him, my son was with me. So I had this gentleman put my son in the gravel lot along the edge of the road. And I said, put my son where this thing was at, we're not in the road, but on the gravel. And I was like, you have me pull my car. I said, I'll pull my car down and you have me stop where you were. So he did that. And the very first thing I did was took a picture through my windshield. And then I got out and showed him. I said, what do you notice? And he said, you can't see the feet. So you couldn't see my son's legs from the knees down.
Mm-hmm.
So they were that close. And we measured it, and it was like, I think it was like 12 or 13 feet maybe between the car and this thing. So they had a really good viewpoint of it.
Wow. That's interesting. I had Gary. So Gary asked, let me see, find this. I'm not sure I'm following him, but he says, oh, where did he put that? He says, is it okay to ask questions about one's encounter, but when they start throwing out slurs? And I'm not, when they start throwing out slurs, when Sasquatch starts throwing out, I'm not sure. So I said, what did they say, Gary? And his reply was, you should know what they say. I don't know what you're saying, Gary. I expand on it here. Help me out. Type out in chat specifically what you're asking, and we'll ask it. But anyways, so let me ask you, Les, have you, so your sons, first of all, how old are your sons? Are they teenagers now, or younger, or some younger? Or?
Yeah, mine, I got a pretty big span there. I have 25, 17, 12, and 6. So yeah, it's a big span.
Well, that is a pretty, I've got a short span. I've got 17 and 18-year-olds that are 10 months and 5 days apart. They're the same age 2 months a year, but my youngest one came a month early, so they kind of really close together. But yeah, I mean, you kind of get used to being out of diapers, and then all of a sudden here comes the youngest one. Huh?
Yeah,
feel like you're starting over again. But that's cool. I mean, that's got to be neat to be able to see how they interact with each other too. Like when they're out in the field, what an 18-year-old's going to say and how he perceives something versus a 6-year-old. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. Do you guys, other than, I mean, we're not talking hardcore out there to research, but I mean, do you guys do a lot of camping and, like hunting, fishing?
Yeah. Well, my oldest son, he's got his own little family now. So when he gets time, he does. The other 3 go out with me at times, but my youngest one's the one that does a lot with me, or for the most part, like I said, I do most of the stuff by myself.
So Alex says, hey, Jeff, Les is one of the best researchers out there, especially in Appalachia. Great dude, always an awesome time with him, which to be honest with you, I highly respect Alex's opinion. So that's speaking pretty well of you there, Les. So
I appreciate it, Alex. Alex is a good dude. We've done a few things together in the past here recently.
One of our friends, Jen, she's a kind of an artist. Well, not kind of, she is an artist, but she's kind of gotten into the whole drawing Bigfoot. And she says, does Les have those drawings available? I'd like to compare to the one I did. So we have a friend named Joe Snyder who has Western New York Bigfoot as a channel. He's the host. He's a great guy. He's had a great encounter himself, and he explained in detail the description to Jen, and Jen did an amazing job at drawing it for him. Joe, he uses it on some of his merchandising and marketing of his channel. But yeah, do you have you shared it in your Facebook group, some of those drawings and things like that, or is that just something that you've kind of sat on? Or
Uh, there's been a couple, but they're nothing like what you probably are thinking. They're just typical little sketches. They're not really elaborate sketches, but
they're
they
more for reference than artistic
yeah,
detail, so to speak?
right,
Yeah.
yeah. But the one that the lady drew there on that account, yeah, the facial features, like I said, they're rudimentary, but the facial features match to me. To me, look real similar. The same way the way the nose was shaped. She even drew the little turned down mouth, and the picture that I had in my files that the fella picked had a slight frown to it and the wider nose, and so but yeah, they looked really familiar or similar.
Yeah.
And like I said, I interviewed him separately, so and because
Interesting.
she didn't see the picture and he didn't see the drawing, so.
So Judy says, Sasquatch out of the shadows. Hello, very cool name. Judy, and you might know this, Judy, but that is Alexander Petikoff, our friend. He's been on our show before. And you've been on Alex's show, haven't you, Les? Or
Yes.
yeah, he's got a great
Yep.
show. Go ahead and check out his channel, folks. It's the same name, Sasquatch Out of the Shadows. Typically, I don't know if sometimes he does some out of state research, takes him on the road, and he won't do a show for a week or two, and then he'll get back in the rhythm of it again. But uh, me and Alex have a lot of mutual respect for each other. He typically starts his show not a couple hours earlier than I do. So about the time his is ending, mine's starting. We've always tried to make sure we aren't stepping over each other in that way, because I think we do share a lot of the same people in chat. And so for the most part, I don't really care what shows are on what night. If we're going to broadcast on Monday night, that's when we do it. But Alex has always been one I try to show some kind of share our audience. Got Blake's here from the Lost Cryptids Conservatory. Nice to see you, Blake. He's also got a great channel you folks can check out. Same name on YouTube, Lost Cryptids Conservatory. So do you have, I'm kind of curious, one of the questions I'm kind of curious about is, up here in northern Minnesota, we get some seasonal changes, obviously. I mean, we go from, this is the pleasant time of year right now in the fall, but in the winter we'll get, 30 degrees below zero with wind and whatnot for, sometimes weeks at a time. And we do see some difference. I want to say we see some difference in the number of accounts and stuff that come out, but then again, there's just simply less people that are out in the woods in those times. So I don't know if that's accurately representing any change in population in Sasquatch, but it certainly is limiting the amount of people that are out there exposed to possible interaction. West Virginia, do you tend to see certain times of the year where it seems more active than others, or is it pretty even keeled there?
It seems like spring and fall are the more maybe the more active, but I have sightings throughout the year. The wintertime, it seems to slack off, but yeah, it's more spring and fall than anything else.
Yeah. Alex says, Les was my 5th or 6th show, I think. Appreciate the shout out. Once I get the show up and running, I'll get you on as well. Long overdue. Yeah, I was on. Me and Alex I like getting him on when I want somebody's perspective. Usually like if I'm going to have a panel of 2 or 3 people, because it's a topic that I don't just want to expose what my theory of something is, but I really want to represent what maybe 3 or 4 people who maybe would really well represent a plausible theory as it pertains to something. Alex has always kind of been one of those go-to guys for that. But let's see here. I was just checking to seeing if we have any other questions up here and get them up. If you guys have questions, feel free to put them in all caps and I will try to get them asked. So you say that you know, even though maybe your primary focus is on Bigfoot, when it comes to researching other areas of the paranormal, I mean, out of curiosity, I'm curious, what do you do, some ghost investigations or haunted investigations, anything like that? Or
Yeah, that's where I started. I started paranormal investigating probably 20 years ago, and done that for many years. I still do it on occasions. I actually did, was it last weekend? Yeah, it was last weekend. I did an investigation in Braxton County, West Virginia. This coming November, I'll be in Moundsville doing an investigation there on the West Virginia State Penitentiary, the old penitentiary. But I've done several of the bigger locations, like most guys do, or your groups and folks do. But I've done many residential cases over the years, and I've seen some interesting things and experienced some interesting things.
well, you know, and I've always had an interest in that because I proclaim this at least every other show, because so many people, they hear you say something, they say, "Oh, so you believe this is real or that's real?" I can tell you that I believe that. I don't believe Sasquatch is real. I know it's real. I mean, because of an encounter that I had, I'm kind of forced into the whole. I don't really have a choice in the matter anymore. I've seen what I saw, but when it comes to orbs or UFOs or hauntings and ghosts, and even maybe some of the other cryptids that people talk about, I'm not saying all of them, I think that they are a legitimate, real phenomena. You know, how they're related. You know, like I always, the old joke: until I see Bigfoot fart out an orb, I don't know that they're connected. But
Yeah,
you know, you get people that will say, "Well, I saw light or shimmer or whatever when in their Bigfoot encounter." But then for every one of those, I could show you 10 that didn't see any lights or shimmer. So I mean,
right.
it's hard to say there's a hard connection. But finding the trackway is asking, in Les's interviews, has there been much spoken about curious lights? I would imagine he's talking about interviews you did when you were investigating different Sasquatch encounters.
I've had a couple people say they've seen, balls of lights, but most of the time, like you said, they're not even related to any Bigfoot encounter. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
been a couple. I actually had an experience myself with lights. I was actually on a Bigfoot investigation. I went to this gentleman's house. We went to his location that he had a sighting. We spent hours together talking about his what he saw, and he was such a skeptic about it. He, even after what he saw, he didn't want to say he saw Bigfoot. He said, "You take it for what you want. I'm going to describe what I saw, but I'm not going to say it's Bigfoot."
Hmm.
So I got permission to stay on the property next to him, and like I said, I was there to see if I would hear or see anything. Um, I didn't hear anything. I actually went onto the property, stayed in a big. I drove onto a big field because I have an old van and an old town and country van that I got set up. I got a bed in it. I got all my stuff in it. I got my food in it. I got my cameras and stuff in it. So when I'm ready to go, I go. And well, this night I actually stayed in the van in this field, sitting in the front seat, and I'm sitting there to listen and see if I'd hear, because they say they were telling me they could hear these whoops, they could hear these howls and screams, and I didn't hear anything. But for some reason, I seen about softball to baseball size, two of them, white lights down in the corner of this field. There, it was about 100 yards away. There's a small pond, just a little tiny watering hole for the cattle that used to be there. And I see this light, and it's not shining on anything. It's not emitting light like a flashlight would. It was just a soft white light, and it was floating, kind of like it would move slightly, like up and down, and it floated across that, toward that pond, like toward the back part of that pond. And the next thing, and this would be like at my 9 o'clock position if I was looking out the window, like I'm sitting in the van. You could look to the 9 o'clock to my left, and it just disappeared. So I'm sitting and watching to see if I see it again or see what it is, because I'm not. I mean, I have no idea what I'm seeing. And then a few seconds later, my 11 o'clock position, I see it show back up, and it just does the same thing. It just slowly moves and kind of like up and down, like this little up and down movement, and goes up along the fence line and disappears in the trees. There was nothing. There's nothing down there that would make the lights. Nothing that would reflect. I'm in the middle of the field. The only thing that's down there is a fence line and another field that turns into woods in the right of way. To this day, I have no idea what it was. And I was so like, I don't want to say stunned, but I was like enamored of what I'm looking at that I didn't even bother to pick up my phone camera, which I don't think my phone would have done it. My phone probably wouldn't have picked it up anyway that far away. And I'm like just what, then after it happened, like, what in the world did I see, But that's the only time.
How many times you hear accounts like that, and people are like, "Well, did you film it, or did you do that?" It's like there are times when you kind of get caught in a moment to where there are certain options that just don't occur to you because you are so laser focused on trying to identify what it is that you're witnessing at that moment, But
yeah, and that's what I was doing, because I was watching it, and I didn't want to take my eyes off of it. I want to see what it was doing, or where it was going, or what it could have been. And it when I first seen it, I'm not thinking it's anything strange. I'm thinking it's something making a light. There's some, but no, there was nothing there. And I talked to the property owner after that. And I asked him, I said, "Have you ever seen any lights or anything strange on this property?" Because he was he was also telling me that they hear the howls and the screams, and he's like, "No," he said, "I've never seen any lights." But then he calls me. I can't remember how long it was. It was a few days to a week later, and he calls me and he said, "Hey," he said, "You were talking about those lights." He said, "I told you I've never seen anything like that." And he said, I'll stick to that. I've never seen any lights." He said, "But where you saw the lights." He said, "There's, the cabin that sets up on the hill. There was another old cabin that was on the other property." And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Well, my brother and I were working on that same fence line that you were, where you had your experience." And he said, I first had the feeling that I need to look up." And he said, "I looked up toward that cabin, and I'm trying to paint the picture here. The cabin sat on a bank, and there's like bigger oak trees and stuff. And there was no undergrowth. They just had bigger trees surrounding this cabin, and they were 20, 30, 40, 50 feet apart." And he's like, "I looked up, and to the left of that cabin, there's a big oak tree." He said, "I see this figure lean out from behind the tree and then go back behind the tree." And I was like, "Was it Bigfoot?" Yeah. I said, Did you have a Bigfoot sighting?" He's like, "I don't believe so." He said, "It didn't look like any kind of animal or whatever." He said, I just seen a figure."
mm-hmm.
And he said, "I watched this tree." He said, "I watched it for several seconds." He said, "There is no way that anything left from behind that tree went anywhere else without me seeing it." He said, "But within about 10, 15 seconds, I noticed on the other side of the cabin, same thing. This figure leans out from behind the tree and then goes back." He said, "I can't explain it, but it was just weird that there was light, that I saw the lights." And he finally come forward and said he's seen something strange there as well.
Well, let me ask you this, and I this question is derived because I think that this is something that we see oftentimes when people are sharing and explaining an encounter, what they perceived, what they saw, and they'll go out and explain it, and sometimes in very good detail that
Mm.
this is what I saw, this is what, and even in their account, sometimes they'll say, well, I know it wasn't this, I know it wasn't that. But then they'll say, well, I'm not saying that I saw Bigfoot. And I'm thinking, you are saying you saw Bigfoot. I mean, you're not allowing yourself to verbally speak those words, but I think they know what they feel they saw. It's just there's this block that occurs. Like they just can't get to that point where they can acknowledge it. Do you see that oftentimes with people sharing accounts?
Yeah, I mean, on occasions, I mean, like I said, that fellow had that encounter. He did. He's like, just he was like, I don't want to say it's that. He said, you take it for what I'm telling you, but I don't want to say that's what it was. He said because he said I'm a hardcore skeptic to start with, and he said, but I know what I saw as far as the description of what he saw, and what he
Yeah.
saw was a large, upright, walking, hairy creature that it wasn't even a solid color. It was more like, you know, it was darker in some areas and lighter in some areas,
Yeah.
but he still did not want to say that he
Yeah.
saw a Bigfoot.
It's like if you were to, and I don't like doing this. I don't like reverse, I'm not going to say interrogating, but, asking the questions of, well, do you think it was a human? And they say, well, no. Do you think it was a black bear? No. What's left? I mean, you can walk them into the scenario where they're kind of coming to grips with the fact that, yeah, I guess maybe I do feel it probably was. But just saying that, they feel like, oh, now I'm turning in my skeptic card, right? There's a lot of people who are believers that still remain skeptical. I mean, they might not be skeptical of the possibility that it exists, but they're skeptical of how many there are, where could they be, why are they there, what do they do? Everybody's got their different opinions. And so Sharon asked an interesting question, and as a guy, our typical response would be, "No, I'm not scared of anything." But especially with the fact that you look at different areas of the paranormal and investigating, has now she called you Lee, but has Les ever been scared by an experience he's witnessed? That's a good question.
Um, I mean, are we talking paranormal all across the board,
I think so.
or
I mean, I
okay,
I I would say that it's easy to see a Sasquatch or what you would perceive to be
yeah,
a Sasquatch from 200 yards away and say, I'm not sure. But when you're in a house and something falls out of shelf and breaks, I mean, something like that,
well,
that's a whole different type of scared.
yeah, well,
But
I've seen several things while investigating, but well, let me just back up and tell you how I got into where I'm at now. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, uh, for some reason we moved several times during my younger age. But when I was around 7 or 8, we moved into an old farmhouse that was clear at the head of this hollow. It was called Michael's Hill, and the farmhouse was built in the 1800s and whatnot. And well, from the time I walked into that house, I had the strangest feeling of being. It was just uneasy. I was uneasy. Some people may say, "Oh, it was a young kid's imagination," but no, I had the strangest feelings in that house. When I'd walk past doorways, that if the rooms were dark, I always felt like something. I would avoid the doors. I would go around as far as I could because I felt like I was going to be something was going to yank me through into the dark. Well, after we'd been there, first, no, it wasn't a long time, but I started experiencing something strange in my room. We had my brother and I shared a room. We had a set of bunk beds in this room. Across from the bunk beds, there was the only thing in the room was the bunk beds and an armoire where we kept our clothes. Because, like I said, it was an old farmhouse, and I was just all that was there. Um, the doorway was on my left, and there was a window on my right. I slept on the bottom bunk, and I started noticing I could see these little shadows from the corner by the door moving across the wall over to the wall. It was like they would go behind the armoire and go to the wall where the window was at and disappear through the wall, or just disappear. I don't know what they did. Um, then that happened for a few days. It wasn't like consecutive days, but it was spread out. And then one night, and each time that this happened, I'd cover my head up. Couldn't scream for my dad. I was so scared. Couldn't scream for my dad. I'd cover my head up. I'd either fall asleep, or when I'd look again, I didn't see it. Well, after this happened a few times, I looked in the corner and I was watching the shadows, and I noticed this taller, much bigger. I mean, because the other shadows were only, 2 feet high. This thing was like 7, almost, because it had 10-foot ceilings, and it was up there. And again, I was scared to death. I'd pull the covers up and just, I couldn't scream for my dad or nothing. I couldn't move, I could move, but I couldn't. I was terrified. And that happened like 3 or 4 times. And on the last time it happened, I remember looking over and seeing it again. But this time I did something different. I didn't just cover my head. I actually sat up in my bed, and I leaned, because the bed was in the corner of the room. And I sat up and I put my back against the corner where the post was on the bed. And when I did that, this thing went from watching the shadows cross the floor, cross the wall, to turning its head toward me. And then within a split second, its face, or whatever you want to call it, was within 8 to 10 inches of my face. It was right here. It was right in front of me. And what I remember seeing was the head, the shoulders, like the neck area. But it didn't look like the arms were separated. It was just like one solid figure or shape from here down. But the black that was inside this thing wasn't like a solid black. It was like smoke rolling around inside the shape. And it stayed there. For me, it seemed like just like forever. Like it was like an eternity. And then eventually it like kind of turned to its left, and kind of, I was describe it as floated or glided out of the doorway. And
fluid movement to it.
Yeah. And so that's what got me started in to the paranormal world. I started looking for answers. When I was a kid, I always read books about stuff. And then as I got older, I learned about investigating. So I started looking into investigating. And I was one of the folks that started out with like compasses and using different other little things, that watch things move. You see if you can find any movement of those things. And it progressed, and I started a small group, and I wanted to help others find answers, which I never found any answers for myself. But when other people had experiences, I wanted to help those folks. So I would do investigations on homes and help them learn that, or even if I have to tell them like, hey, let's look at this a certain way, and this may not be paranormal. I always look for the natural.
You might not find evidence of what you're looking for, but a lot of times in the experiences of others, we find details that run parallel to our experiences, and it's kind of neat to draw those connections when you see those. We see those obviously in the Bigfoot community a lot of times when you're looking at other encounters and comparing them, but I think you see it in the paranormal community too. Now, what you explained there that you experienced as a kid is pretty scary. That directly goes against what Mothman says about you. He says Les doesn't get scared. He's got a Bigfoot rug in front of his fireplace. It's not dead. It's just afraid to move. Which is good. Now, Jen brings up a interesting question, because you kind of talked a little bit about the compasses and thing. If you could get those anomalies to occur that you hear, about in the paranormal community. Does Les use any paranormal equipment in Bigfoot research? For instance, an EMF spirit box, dowsing rods.
Yeah, yes, I do. On occasions, I do. Not necessarily when somebody contacts me, but if I'll go to areas where there's been sightings, and I'll go out by myself. I do take a lot of times. I have dowsing rods I carry with me. I have a K2 meter I carry with me, and sometimes I take a spirit box. But I definitely have recorders with me. But I don't always use them. But hey, it's always worth a try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that especially in when you're looking at something outside of the Bigfoot community that could likely involve a supernatural connection to explain it. I guess those tools would be interesting to employ in that case, as far as an EMF or a spirit box, things like that. Um, and I think most of that investigate in that community probably do use those tools.
Yeah.
Just looking to see if anybody else had anything. There's a few people that have to pop off, hit the bed. Good night, Sharon. Appreciate you joining us tonight. So, do you have anything on the horizon coming up? I mean, do you typically attend some of the get-togethers, conventions, things like that are Bigfoot or paranormal related that happen in West Virginia or in the surrounding states at all?
Yeah, I just spent the weekend in Ohio in Hocking Hills. I was a speaker at the Hocking Hills Bigfoot conference this past weekend.
Nice.
I have my own expo coming up this coming weekend, but yeah, I'm also part of the West Virginia Bigfoot Festival. I'm in the symposium, the speaker symposium. I'm in charge of that. So that'll be coming up again next year, or we had that earlier this year. Actually, Alex was I had him there speaking.
Nice.
I'm the Bigfoot museum that was which that's attached to in Sutton, West Virginia. I helped get that up and going. But yeah, I do what I can. I got trying to think here. I know I got a few things coming up. Just some local stuff. I got a small speaking events coming up here in, I think it's the 15th or 17th of October.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually speaking at they're having a Gray Barker Day here in West Virginia. I don't know if anybody knows who Gray Barker was, but he's well known. He's long gone now, but he's a well known investigator, ufologist, and stuff here in West Virginia. He worked with John Keel Tom's on the Mothman investigation. He was one of the investigators that was involved with the Flatwoods Monster here in West Virginia. He was an investigator that took the first account of what they call the Grafton Monster here in West Virginia. So I'll be speaking just a few words at the Gray Barker Day here. I think it's the 22nd of this month, and
Cool.
then a couple other things in November, and I think there's one thing coming up in December.
Sure. Chessboard asks, has Les ever been to Weston Asylum?
Yes, sir. More than several times.
Tell us a little bit about that. What was that like?
It's an interesting place. I don't if you've never seen it. It's a sight to see. It is the second largest sandstone hand cut sandstone building in the world. The only one bigger is the Kremlin in Russia. It was opened in the 1800s. I think it closed in 1994. Off record, depending on what you hear, because I guess a lot of the files disappeared. Anywhere from, I guess, 10 to 50,000 people died in that establishment.
Wow.
I've had some weird experiences there. when I've been there, but I have friends that were tour guides there for the paranormal side of it, that experienced a lot of different things. But yeah, it can be a creepy place. It has creepy stories that lend to that creepy feeling, I guess. Well, I can't really. Let me say, there's things that happen there. The stories that are just downright disturbing. And
Yeah,
one of
once
those,
I think once you're aware of them
yeah,
prior to going there, how do you walk into the building without it feeling? I mean, that's it's a lot to overcome as far as the
yeah.
knowledge and knowing what you're walking into. What do you have an example of some of the things that? Let's see. Oh, somebody says Jeff seems to be paying attention to chat more than the guest. Is he expecting? Oh boy. Well, I'm looking for questions to ask the guests like I always am. So, um, as far as being at Weston Asylum, you say you've been there a couple different times.
Hmm.
Is there anything that, I mean, do you plan on going back at all, or is this
Oh
something
yeah,
that you'd like to go back to?
oh yeah. I would go. Uh, I'd love to go again. I mean, it's open. I mean, it's open to the public. Yeah, I mean, it's like any of these other big locations. You pay to go, but I was fortunate enough that I had friends there, and I was able to go. Uh, Shadow them is what they were calling it. I would follow along with these tours, and I had to keep in the middle of just in this building in the middle of the night, keep track of everybody that might wander off. So yeah, and then I had a couple experiences while I was doing that. I've heard a couple of voices in the building. Uh, had a couple of doors that would open and close on their own, which that could be explained. But yeah, it was always a creepy time.
Hmm. Did I put another? Can you see the screen right there?
Yeah, I've never had the opportunity to go to Mansfield. I've always wanted to, but never have.
If that I from what I've read about it, I mean that would be that'd be another interesting place to check out. Definitely.
I see
And
the
we've
fellow there.
got remember to go to West Virginia Case Paranormal Exposition this Saturday, October 8th to see Les live.
That's my buddy right there. Thank you,
He's your
Roger.
he's your hype man right there.
Yeah,
That's
he's a
cool.
good guy.
Chessboard
Good guy.
says, Jeff, tell Les I was born in Buckhannon, 15 miles from Weston. I remember hearing screaming from there as a kid. But that would be a little unsettling, wouldn't it?
He's not telling a lie there. I've talked to several people because this building sits along a small. I mean, Weston the majority of it's across the river, but there are homes. Like if you're looking at the front of the building, there are homes along the left side of the building, and I've talked to people that have lived in those buildings, and it's not just paranormal screams. They said they would the patients would scream nonstop every
Hmm.
day, whether they was in the yard or in the building. But
Wow,
yeah, they grew up around that. Yeah.
that is crazy. So, also, I mean, in West Virginia, you've got there's a lot of rich Civil War history in that area. I mean, have you had opportunities to do investigations in historical areas like that when it comes to the cemeteries and
Uh,
different
one of the more interesting places it's called Droop Mountain Battlefield. It has a lot of interesting lore to it, like soldiers being seen. There's even a headless ghost story that comes from that area. Did I have experience anything why I was there, no, but there definitely is a lot of stories that come from that, this Droop Mountain battlefield, which is not just that is it the battlefield itself is interesting, but there's other stories that are from that area. There's what they call the witch's house that supposedly only can be found on certain day or certain times. Then you have a little further down, you have the what they call it's called the Greenbrier Ghost. It was the only time in history that a ghost testimony had convicted, led to a conviction. Yeah, it's actually on the books.
That is pretty interesting. So Mothman says, ask him about West Virginia Giants history.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of like giant lore around here. There's been, especially in my area, in other parts of the state, there's several mounds down in Kanawha County. There's mounds, and the Moundsville, right at the Moundsville Penitentiary, there's a mound just across the road from it. It's called a Grave Creek Mound. Supposedly giants were found in it. There's oak mounds in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Supposedly those have never been excavated, but there's stories of giants in that area. But where I'm at, there's a town called Reesville, and there's Fairmont, Reesville, then it goes into Morgantown, and the Monongahela or the Monongahela River runs from Fairmont all the way to Pittsburgh. Well, at the confluence of the West Fork and the Tigard River that makes the Mon River, if you read some of the text that's out there, it talks in some of the older papers, it talks about earthen mounds that were found that stretched from there to an area called Little River or Little Creek in just down in Mon County. So that always caught my interest, and I started looking into things. And I've always heard about giants being found in Reesville, West Virginia, which is just outside of Fairmont. So I researched those a little bit, tried to see if they were real. Well, the story was that they were these giant skeletons were found, but they were reburied somewhere around that area in a cemetery called the Jolliffe Cemetery. Well, after doing research, there's no Jolliffe Cemetery in Marion County. So I started looking at old maps and stuff like that, and I found a plot of land that's just across the county line that was J. Jolliffe. It was a larger plot of land. I went to that property. I talked to the gentleman that lived on the property, and I asked him, I said, is there a cemetery here, family cemetery? And he's like, no. He said, no, there's no family cemetery. He said, I'm a descendant of Jolliffe's, but he said Jolliffe's still live on other parts of the property or nearby. He said, but there is the burial mound. And I'm standing on his back porch, and I could see this like hillside. Well, he took me and walked me around it, and I thought what I thought was just a hillside is actually a huge mound sitting in the middle of this field. So I've asked him several questions, and he's like telling me that when he was a kid, that mound, nobody was allowed on the mound. The cattle were not allowed on the mound. They put a fence around it. And then as I was leaving, he goes, by the way, he said, there's no cemetery here, but across the creek up on the hill, there's a cemetery up there. He said, you might want to check it out. So I went up, and I was a little disappointed at first because it was like newer modern stones and stuff. And then as I was walking around, I noticed in the back corner, it's kind of sloped over, and I could see a huge cedar tree, and then beside it was a huge stub of a dead, some kind of dead tree. So I just like, cedar trees and big trees, and family cemeteries for some reason around this area always were near trees, bigger trees. I don't know why they did it. I still don't know why they did it. And so I started walking toward that area, and I come across the first stone that was older. And when I read the name on it, it says Jolliffe. And then I kept finding other ones that said Jolliffe, Jolliffe, Jolliffe. And then there was just these two wooden planks. So all this little area, to me, is a Jolliffe cemetery. So that got my interest peaked quite a bit. So I decided, well, if this is a Jolliffe cemetery and possibly they were buried here, I'm going to start looking into the folks that were involved in finding those giants and why and
Sure.
so to see if the story actually went anywhere, or maybe it was just a legend. Well, Dr. Zedekiah Kidwell was a doctor that supposedly examined him. Uh, then there was a squire in town. Forget his last name, or first name, but his last name was Satterfield. So I looked into finding both of those. I found Satterfield. He was a real person. I found out where he's buried, and he's only buried a mile away from where the giants were supposedly found. And then I found the doctor. I actually found a cemetery in the town of Fairmont, or the city of Fairmont, that has been grown over for Lord knows how long. I actually crawled through brush and briars through the cemetery for hours trying to find his grave, and I eventually found it. I found, and so there, those 2 points where these two people are real.
Wow.
So when I looked more into the property and into the doctor and whatnot, I started looking in. I found the doctor's bio. Somebody had written a bio on him, and one of the very last things in the bio says he was a upstanding member of the MP Church. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm like, where have I heard that before? Where have I seen that before? And then it dawned on me the old maps that I were looking at, that I had been looking at. So I pulled the maps back up, and the same map that I found the mound on, or not the mound, the property, the J. Jolliffe property, right beside that property, right beside the mound, there's a church that's called in the 1860s was called the MP Church. So that just I'm like, to me, if he was a member of that church, the macadam, see, I even forgot the macadam road. There was a road that supposedly ran from with those earthen mounds along the river, and they called it the Macadam Road. And there was other giants found along that road, but it was a 9 feet wide, 14 inches thick, stone and crushed mussel shell road, and it ended at Little Creek, which Little Creek is right there where that mound is. And so I think if those giants did exist and they were found, I think they were taken and put in that cemetery near that MP Church and that mound. So
I mean, that's plausible. I mean, with the connection that you made with both of them being able to actually find the record of those guys and establish what you did, I mean, certainly would be plausible. Just checking to see if there was any other questions. I know a lot of the people were asking about or commenting on the different things we've been talking about. But no, that's interesting. I mean, so the Facebook group that you have is actually called West Virginia.
It's WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters.
Yeah, WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters, right?
Yeah.
So people can find you on Facebook. Check that out. Join the 20,000 people almost that are following Les. And I would imagine that you keep people pretty up to date on there when you're going to be speaking somewhere or talking about things, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you have a YouTube channel too that you put information on, or not using a lot?
I do when I occasionally do. I just, like, if I go out on my adventures, when I do most of the stuff by myself, it's nothing that's in my opinion, nothing that's fabulous or grand, but
just casual adventures.
Yeah.
That's what I'll probably be using my my old Pine Island Research channel. I kept that active on YouTube after I joined the Untold network here, just because I thought it would be fun, if I'm going to go out to an area, or if we go to a conference and want to do something live from it, it'd be fun to still have a place to put that kind of stuff out. Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight and share what you've shared. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about other than where they can find you?
No. I mean, yeah, they can find me on Facebook. The rest of the YouTube channel is the same thing. WV Cryptids Strange Encounters.
You're pretty
if anybody,
accessible.
yeah. I mean, I don't do anything else. I'm not on those other Snapchat, Instagram, stuff like that. It's just Facebook. It's hard enough to keep up with the Facebook page and everything else. So
I hear you. And
I see my buddy Gabe asked me a question. It says, Les, did my grandmother send you the video of my Mothman? Yes, she did, Gabe. But for some reason I can't get it to load. I forgot to send her a message back that I can't get it to load. So if I'll try it again. If not, maybe she can send it to me again.
Mothman says he's being humble. His YouTube is great. So let me just pull that up. What is the YouTube channel called again?
Same thing. WV Cryptids and Strange Encounters. Yeah. I mean, I don't do anything special in there. I don't do anything hype. I just go out and record what I do and put it on there.
Sure.
So there's no flashy stuff. So
I'm going to put that in the chat here so people got a link they can click on. And also, let's feel free after the show posts in the comments of the post, if you want to run into the comments there and leave a link to the YouTube and the Facebook group, that'd be awesome, because we we do the show live here on Facebook and YouTube, but it goes to podcasts and all the different podcast platforms after the fact. So we get a lot of people listen to the show, after we put out the live version, and they'll see those comments. So I encourage you guys, if you have theories or opinions on the show, things that you wanted to mention that Les has talked about, something that you could add to the conversation, throw it in the comments. We'd appreciate that. Also, maybe I know Les had put a link to the show on his Facebook saying he was going to be on. Feel free to comment and ask him further questions about his experiences, probably on Facebook. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. If you want to message me about anything, feel free to. And I see a couple people say, okay, Judy, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, Judy. Roger, thanks. Thanks for that comment, buddy. And I'll see you Saturday, Gabe. Gabe, my buddy Gabe Berry, he's a young man that's works very hard. He makes he has a little business called Wood in West Virginia. He makes pretty awesome. Cool. I got one here on my desk. He makes things like this right here, the little laser etched wood burning things. And
that's cool.
He does a great job.
Cool. Well, and he can feel free to throw in the comments where they can find him on Facebook if he's got a page. Because I wouldn't mind looking at the things he makes. I'm sure other people would too. So, but no, I appreciate it, Les. I know with somewhere around that house, I haven't heard it. You're doing a remarkable job. If there's a 6-year-old there, you are doing well at hiding that fact. But I know you've got to be pretty busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. It was really a pleasure talking to you, hearing you share your experiences.
I appreciate the invite, and I've had a good time.
Yeah, well, we will be asking you back at some point, I'm sure, also on the Untold Radio Network. Like I said earlier, there's 8 shows over 7 nights, And you may have one of our other hosts contacting you at some point, asking if you'd like to come on their show, just because they do have a special interest. Some of these shows really look at the paranormal haunting part, haunted sites,
Yeah.
things like that. I think you'd be a great guest for one of their shows too. So, who knows? Maybe one of them will be reaching out to you soon. So,
Well, we could have dug in a little bit into the Bigfoot stuff if you wanted. I mean, so maybe next time I'd be
I
willing.
tell you, I like talking about it all. I mean, we get in a box sometimes just talking about Bigfoot, but like I say, I mean, I think most people are open minded to understand that I'm not saying that Mothman's real or Dogman's real. It may be, it may not be. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't have as a researcher who's looking at a flesh and blood subject in Bigfoot is how I approach it. Um, but I'm very open minded when it comes to ghosts and hauntings and ufology, things like that. I think, to be honest with you, you'd have to be fairly naive not to consider the fact that ghosts are real.
Yeah.
And even if you don't think they're real, to be able to say they're indefinitely, they're definitely not real. I don't know how you could base a statement like that.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
I think most people have an interest in that part of the paranormal.
I'll leave us with this. I don't know. I mean, I know, like you said, you're a believer, but you're a Bigfoot believer because you had your experience. I've not had any experience. I pretty much call myself a skeptic believer,
Yeah,
because or a proxy believer, because I have a belief that something's out there because of what people tell me, and I've talked to a lot of people that to me have very legitimate stories, but I also have those questions of, you know, how come we haven't found this, or how,
sure.
if they are this big, why don't we find traces better? But I have found a few things in my investigations, because I don't even consider myself a researcher, because and people ask me why, and it's because there are far more people out there that are far more learned than I am, and educated, and because I don't know all the ins and outs of the history of Bigfoot stuff. I don't know all the famous accounts across the United States, across the world, whatever. I but I do focus my my work here, and sometimes in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and I will take anything. I will listen to anything anybody has to say, whether it's strange or not. Mainly because I feel like I'm doing that witness an injustice, and maybe me as well, as far as my type of investigating,
Mhm.
because I want to make sure I can build that database to figure out that this is an animal over here, which in my heart, if Bigfoot is real, I want it to be, I want to be a flesh blood thing. But I'm not wanting to shy away from something that's weird, that has some kind of aspects of Bigfoot to it, because eventually, which has happened yesterday, you know, I'll have something in those files that somebody else will talk about that may be completely from a different location that matches those other files. So
Yeah, it's
to me,
relevant to the.
yeah, to me, that may not be Bigfoot. They may not be Bigfoot, but that might be something completely different that needs looked at as well. Um, so that's why I take stories, or take accounts, whether they're strange or not.
Sure. Well, and I think that's a good motivation and a way to approach it, because I've said in the past that I think we are all students and we're all professors. I mean, we teach each other and we learn from each other. And
Mm.
the more you can record your experiences and data that you uncover and have that accessible, the more helpful you can be to somebody else who needs that data or is looking for that data. So,
And
um,
I'm one that will do that. If I've had numerous people contact me and say, "Hey, do you have something here? Do you have something in this area? Do you have something in this county?" And if I do, and if it's in my files and I can look it up, I'll send it to them. Whether it's,
yeah,
take a picture and send it to them, or I'm not one that's like, no, I'm not going to tell you anything, you know, because this is my area, you know. I just don't feel that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
we all, you know, for us to find the answers to what all these questions are, I think we all should work together. And you know, sometimes, you know, you're going to have people bump heads, but you don't have to be jerks to each other. So,
I would agree with that. I mean, I have yet to meet two people in the Bigfoot Sasquatch research community that agree on 100% of everything. I mean, nobody's
right,
going to rubber stamp endorse somebody else's findings just because they like them. I mean, if you really looked at all of people's theories and their thoughts and explanations, and you're going to find something that you disagree on. And if our agenda is going to be to poison each other over the 5 or 10% that we don't agree on, rather than try to advance the science on the 90% we do, we're in trouble. We aren't going to get anywhere.
right, right.
But some people, you know, they just can't help having to say, this is what bothers me about somebody. I mean, for some reason, there are people out there who have lost the ability to say, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to move on, or I'm going to quit watching the show, or I'm going to, you know, whatever. But instead, they have to hoist it up on a flag. And it's like, I don't know what good comes of that, really. I mean, if me and you if you had said something tonight that I disagree and I just call you out on it and we argue about it, yeah, that's great entertainment. Let's create the 3-ring circus with the shock value title.
Yeah.
Jeff and Les argue about this. How does that advance the science? Why don't we focus on the things that we do find that common interest in? And I wish more people could do that, but I understand that that's just wishful thinking. In reality, there's always going to be somebody who disagrees with you, disagrees with your approach, disagrees with your theory, and you've got to learn to wake up in the morning and keep doing what you do and not let that affect you. Because, you know, if we're going to be successful at moving the ball and advancing the science in any of this, we can't let ourselves get hung up on somebody who disagrees with you, you know. But I appreciate what you've done, what you've shared, and you've been an awesome guest, Les. And yeah, I would like to have you back at some point. So we will be staying in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. You have a great rest of your week, buddy.
You too.
Well, I like him a lot, and you know, and it's cool that some of the people that do know him were in the chat and asking questions about some of the things that they were familiar with. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have known to ask him about Weston, you know. But boy, what a neat story, and really all the experiences that he shared, I think, are compelling and interesting and certainly intriguing, even if some of those subjects aren't your wheelhouse, so to speak. There are some Bigfoot purists who don't want anything to do with any other paranormal. I can appreciate that, but I'll tell you what, there are certain topics that I'm intrigued about, and hauntings, and you know, certainly areas that have historical significance and a track record of hauntings and ghosts. It's intriguing. I'm not very seldom am I going to skip over a ufology conversation. I want to hear other people's opinions on it. I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to that stuff. It's not the corner I shine a flashlight on often, but I appreciate the questions you guys asked in chat. I love the way on our show that our chat is interactive, and we are working at helping each other learn and teach each other. So keep that going strong. I look forward to seeing you next Monday night. We'll have another great show lined up. And you guys take it easy the rest of this week.